Well, due to our dramatic finish to the season on Friday with Rhyl 1879, today is a bit more of a relaxed start to the week. We return today with our end of season review for season 2, and today we're going to have a look in focus at player development. The main reason for that is because there have been a couple of interesting bits I've noted, and the season in terms of development has almost split into two halves. So we're going to talk about that. Of course, we'll do the general season review, look at who won the European Places playoff, and have a little look at what we plan to do this summer. But overall, the focus is on development. So let's go and look at Rhyl 1879 and see what's been catching my eye this year. Yes, hello and welcome along to part 20 and the end of season 2 review from this FM26 Build a Nation story, a Rhyl rebuild with me, Daniel. We are back today to discuss, well, quite a few things in truth. We're going to focus particularly on development, on our players' progression, individual training, and then of course our plans for next year, who got through the European playoff, and a couple of other little things as well, including a coefficient issue, which a few of you have been talking about down in the comments section. So if you're looking forward to all of that, then please do chuck a thumbs up on the video. It's a chance for me, as I mentioned last season, to show the sort of things that we don't get to look at in the regular episodes. Of course, when we're doing our regular sort of 25 minutes a day, it's a couple of games that are important, a little bit of transfer news and all of that stuff. But we don't really get to look at all of the stuff I'm doing behind the scenes in the day-to-day management of the club, and these episodes just allow us to focus on the odd thing each season. We did sneak second on the final day despite a draw, because fortunately for us, there was some disappointment from Connah's Quay, who lost out and dropped second place right at the death. Now that has ended up costing them quite significantly here, because if we go and have a look at Connah's Quay Nomads, they reached the European Places playoff final, they got to it, and they played against Pennybont, and they lost it on penalties after a 0-0 draw. So Pennybont are the third side joining us in Europe next year, and that might prove to be quite a good thing because they've signed a couple of very good players in a January window, Timmy Odesina being one of them, and they've also got a couple of the best players in the division. So Archie Matthews is a very solid goalkeeper. They've also got James Kroll up front, who I think might have won Player of the Year. He was certainly one of the main contenders. So definitely something worth keeping an eye on. Hopefully they'll be able to get a stronger squad rather than relying on amateurs. But for now, let's go and focus on our club side of things. And I want to talk about development quite significantly because it's been a bit of a weird year. We obviously talked about, as we take the players away from holiday so we can have a look, we obviously talked about the fact that we had a lot of problems last season with fixture congestion due to a glitch in the way that the database has been set up in FM26, where the Welsh pyramid has been restructured in season 2. The split date has not been changed. So now the first 30 matches before the split are being played in the same amount of time as the 22 before the split were in season 1 and in previous FM editions. And then the last 5 after the split are being played in the same period that 10 were being played after the split in the previous years. And with the cup schedules and the potential for Europe in the future, that could be a recipe for disaster without a 30 or 35 man squad. Certainly going to be helping our youth development as the years go on, and already is for other clubs too. It is leading to other issues, which are strange team selections. So that European Places playoff final, I actually had to report as a bug because Connah's Quay rested 9 players in it because they were absolutely knackered. And that isn't really what we want to be seeing in the biggest game of the season for clubs. Now, the obvious other factor that we've got to discuss is the European coefficient, because next season Wales will be going down to 3 teams, which doesn't really help. However, one of the things that has been mentioned most in my comments this season is the fact that there are coefficient glitches in FM. However, it has now been confirmed by Sports Interactive that 2 of the 3 glitches were actual faults and have been acknowledged, but will both be save game compatible when they're fixed. So essentially what these are that in the knockout rounds, the way that away legs and defeats are calculated against the overall score aren't correct. But that doesn't matter so much because no Welsh side is reaching the knockout rounds before the next couple of FM patches. Not in this save anyway. The other one that's been noted is in the playoff rounds and the qualifiers, which is definitely a bit more effective for us. The club coefficients are being accurately calculated, but they're not being put correctly onto the nation coefficient. Now, at the bottom level, this isn't a massive issue because actually it's balancing out for all sides where nobody's really making the groups. But in the odd year where one team does, so like TNS did in the first season, and like I think in this say the North Macedonian side did in the second year, it is going to lead to the odd skewing of places from one or two. But again, it will automatically update once the issue's resolved, and we can crack on as normal at that point. The fixture schedule in OneNote is leading to more issues because what we've had this year is the first half of the season where we were playing every 3 days and basically only training one of the 2 sessions a week because we are a part-time side. So we were having game, training session, game. Then the second half of the season, it was about keeping sharpness up because we were organising friendlies some week, but essentially we were just training 3 times instead of playing. And that's had a pretty big impact on the way that players have developed, improved or regressed during this save. Because in the first half of the year, where we weren't training much, one of the things I was noticing is that young players weren't improving really, and older players were actually regressing a little bit. That, of course, is obvious on the face of it because they're not really training at all. They're literally just playing matches and then turning up once a week to do a little bit of tick over fitness work. What we saw in the second half of the year, though, when we had those massive gaps between fixtures, was that it did have a profound benefit on our young players, and I would have to assume than the other young players across the nation. Because if we look, for example, at someone who's come into the first team and then not had to play much because of the fixture schedule, so Charlie Fisher's a great example, he's actually developed from 2.5 to 4-star in the space of 4 months. Now, it's not just the fact he's improved, and technical attributes have been a little bit of a problem on this, but from a mental and physical side, he has trained and improved massively. Now, that's because training intensity has gone up. The assistant has automatically managed general training and made it more intense to make up for the fact that we're not playing many fixtures in the second half of the year. And that has had a profound benefit on someone like Charlie Fisher, but it's also done so for other players in interesting areas as well. So Hamza Ahmed, one of our most important young players that came through that first intake, starting to decline a little bit now because he's in the off-season and on holiday. But he actually, over the course of that 2-month period, gained a whole attribute point on work rate. On another side of that, and something else that's helped us in that period, let's use Neil Bissix as the example here, we had a real problem with some of his physical attributes. So we've been working him on individual training on his quickness, on his acceleration and his pace. And that's improved the whole attribute point in the second half of the year, where again, he's had more time on the training pitch, more time to focus on the individual training elements we've set up, and just been playing in youth games predominantly. So it's something, again, where we've seen profound benefits from not playing regular matches. And it's just a frustration that if this league had been set up properly and we were generally playing once a week throughout the year, I think we'd probably see more overall development and certainly more consistent development across our playing team. Now, with some of our star players, we're not going to see that. And in the first half of the year, for example, Rob Howard really suffered. He went downhill a bit. Mo Ali, I guess international duty and the fact he's 32 contributes a little bit, but he's gone downhill as well. So we're seeing players that are incredibly fatigued for half a year and can't really train, and then are doing nothing but train in the second half. And it's just leading to a little bit of an imbalance, but does mean that we're going to go into each season in a much stronger position because the second half of the year, these players are just going to shoot up in their development, something we've seen from a lot of them, Michael Stanley being another example, and particularly physically and mentally, a chance to really work on those individual training aspects. So I'm not going to go and talk about it too much because obviously we did a full individual training guide on the channel on Saturday. We talked about it a lot in the youth development guide. But it is something that in these long-term saves, I do generally work on. I don't take much of an interest in general training, and particularly in the early years of part-time saves, it doesn't really matter because you're training literally once a week if you've got a midweek match. However, we have tried to take charge of it and have an impact, and it seems to be working to an extent. So for example, Neil Bissix is the one I used. If we go and have a look at the individual training overall, Neil Bissix, I've been working on the role of centre-half. So again, we had a choice between left-back and centre-back because of where he's been playing, because of the fact that he's got weak attributes for a full-back, but we might need him as a backup there. But I predominantly see him as a centre-half in the future. But to do that, we need him to work on his quickness. And that's worked because the individual training has had more time to have an impact this second half of the year, where he's actually got a training session to work on it. Who knew, eh? He's also got his positioning up, as you can see as well, which is helpful. But he's not the only player where that's an example. So Jack Parry, for example, we're working on an individual training focus of shooting. He's playing as a number 10, but he's also going to be our third choice striker at the moment. So he's now working on his finishing attribute. And you can see that's the one that's been improving most in training in recent times. And there are so many other examples of this too. Hamza Ahmed, we've been working on off the ball movement, which had gone up but has now dropped down again, and may well be a contributor to work rate, but is also impacting the anticipation as well, part of the attacking movement's work. The final example I'll use here is the right back Michael Stanley, who we signed. He had a bit of a slow start, he was getting knackered after an hour in each game. So when we got to that quieter part of the season, we got him to work on individual training for endurance, and he's gained a stamina point now. His other attributes are still improving a little bit too, but physically he's becoming a much more important player, which is something we're going to need moving forward. He's also improving in the defensive attributes that are specific to his role, his marking and his anticipation getting better from his out of possession role as a fullback. So there's definitely a suggestion that the second half of the year, we're going to have to really capitalise on developing these younger players, because the first half they're barely going to be training until we can turn professional. And that does seem a few years off with the quality of the league and the fixture congestion at the moment. So obviously not quite as detailed as our step-by-step guides, but I wanted to show you an element of training and development that obviously I can't really focus on in the episodes, but it's something we are doing behind the scenes. And in future years, we'll be doing the same, looking at areas I'm using in the data hub, in the finances, in the staffing, all of those different elements, because we are still doing that work behind the scenes. Just because you can't see it in the daily episodes, don't assume it's not happening, because here it very much is. And in the second half of this season in particular, for a lot of players, it's really worked. And hopefully, as we get better coaches, more coaches in, even next year with one round of European qualifying money, it should allow us to bring an extra coach to the club. It should allow us to bring an extra physio to the club. Can we recover players from injury quicker? Can we get them working more frequently? The more time they're on a training pitch, the better it is for us in a long term. So really pleased with how some of them are finally starting to develop, because for the first year and a half, it looked like that just wasn't happening. And sadly, the best example was Harry Dakin before he got injured, but he's now out until the start of next season. We'll probably miss a lot of the pre-season fixtures as well, which is not ideal. But with that done, let's go and have a quick look at the squad planner and the plans for next season, and then we'll have a little look around as well, see what's been going on elsewhere. If we have a look at our squad planner for now, we're actually planning to have a fairly settled team next year. Last season, we were forced into more changes because we'd relied on a lot of loan players. We'd had a lot of people who were there for the first season but maybe couldn't make the step up. And we had quite a few non-contract players who were taken throughout the year. Next season, we've not really got that. So it's about filling a couple of gaps in the squad, the couple of players that we know are going to be leaving, and then maybe looking at one or two areas where we'd most like to improve. So let's take examples for that. In goal, we're pretty good at the moment, as we are at right back, probably our strongest area on the pitch. At centre-half, we've got 4 decent ones, but Mo Ali's just over the hill. Matty Senior's wanted by other Welsh clubs, and this is a builder nation. If we can improve other clubs in the country by giving them our squad players, we'll do that. So if one of those two goes, one more first-team level player would really make a difference. Left back is the interesting one, though. With Rhys Davies out of contract and not signing a new one, Muscat is a good player, but he's not really pushed on to the next level. I do feel like that's the one area where we've got our first team players in, but I could get a step up to improve that defence. And if we can sign a left back next year, I think that would help us go to the next level. The big priority for us, though, is without doubt holding midfield, because at the moment we're relying on Barnes on loan and Rob Howard, who's the starting centre mid. He's declining and will be leaving this summer. He wants a massive pay rise, which I'm not willing to offer for a player that's going backwards having reached their peak. And that means that Harry Dakin, who's going to miss pre-season, alongside Bronny Phillips, who's wanted again by other clubs, are the only other 2 players left at the club, as well as Senior, who's naturally a centre-half. So I think that's going to be our big priority area. Last year, we found that when we got promoted, we were able to start making offers quite early and finding good players. Having done the recruitment focus and the transfer room in work already, there's not many that are going to be affordable within our current wage structure. And I'm not going to blow all of our European money on quadrupling the wage bill straight away. It's gone up a bit, and so will our top earners, but I'm not going to go mad. So alongside Dakin, we need at least 1 more. Ideally, we're going to need 2 in there, because that's how many we're losing from the first team squad. Could be 3 if Bronny Phillips goes and Lightfoot's out of contract too. In attacking midfield, we're okay. Mikey O'Neill and Jack Parry will do the job. In a long term, yes, we probably need another, but it's not the priority for next year. And the same sort of goes up front, where if we can get a brilliant striker, then great. But Bolton and Ahmed, they're doing the job for now. And with regular football, particularly Ahmed, is looking like he will start to improve. The other area we need to work, though, is wingers. And it's a little bit different to holding midfield because we've got two very good wingers at the club, Petri and Lafondra. If they start next season, I have no complaints whatsoever. Behind it, though, we're losing nearly everything. On the right-hand side, Marner's thrown his toys out the pram and he's leaving. And Kawanda is getting past his prime, bless him. But he has become the most interesting talk of the summer. Because I decided probably around the end of April that, look, he's been really good when he's had to come in and perform. I'd like to just keep him there in case. He's on a tiny wage, like 50, 60 quid a week. Can you sign for one more year? And he asked to be an emergency backup, which I thought fine. But then he said, I'm not signing a contract unless I can be a scout as well. Now that perks my interest because we didn't have any scouting roles free, but we did have one pretty average one out of contracts at the end of the season. And Commander has staffing attributes that aren't that bad. Yes, they're only reasonable for judgment of ability and potential, and yes, his personality is just balanced, but look at his scouting knowledge. He has virtually a full knowledge of certain parts of Africa. He's got a full knowledge of England and Wales. He is someone who can make a massive impact for us in the future. When we reach that stage where we do have European group stage football in maybe 3, 4, 5 years' time, could we get him in as someone to use and scout Africa to find brilliant young players and get them in with work permits before they reach that 18, 19 years of age and allow them to become homegrown at the club? Could be a little bit of a game changer, that. So Damasi Kawanda, as well as being a bit of a legend the first season on the pitch, is someone that may prove imperative off it in the future as well. So keep an eye on him for the future. But for now, we definitely need to improve holding midfield from the start. And if we can upgrade areas such as the wingers, particularly with backups there, and then left back and striker, fantastic. But they're not the priority for now. So that's the end of season focus on our club, on development, preparations for next year, where obviously we're going to be back much earlier than planned for the first qualifying round in Europe. However, if we go and have a look at our squad, it is in pretty good nick. And that's going to be important because with us not being able to find great early signings at the minute, this is largely the team we're going to be relying on in those qualifiers. And while it may harm us from getting few later rounds, it does give us something to build on for now, though I'm very worried about who's going to start holding midfield in that first qualifier, particularly if we haven't signed at least one player by then. Might be Matty Senior and somebody. Let's go and have a look, though, very quickly around the leagues and see what's been going on elsewhere. We know the coefficient problems, so there's no point mentioning them yet, but it does look like Wales have dropped to 3 places next year. For now, let's go and have a look at the Welsh leagues, and of course, we'll go and have a look at England and a couple of other bits too. So very interesting news from the Welsh Prem. Of course, Pennybont secured European football in 4th, which is harsh on Connah's Quay, but all they had to do was draw on that final day and they would have finished above us. And then we would have been the one missing out. Be interesting to see how it goes next year, where Connah's Quay haven't got Europe and other clubs have got to try and adapt. It is also interesting to note that 3 sides went down from the Premier. Haverfordwest finished second bottom and went down automatically in the end, and Pontypridd lost in the playoffs to go back down as well. Mould Alex got to the European Places playoff semi-final, Newtown were almost in the top half, and to be fair, Cambrian United also stayed up from the south. However, 2 of the promoted clubs from that league went down alongside Haverfordwest. But let's see how that compares to the north and south if we go and have a look at those. Because you can see in the north, Llandudno were the title winners on goal difference, having missed out pretty narrowly last year, and Guilsfield, who were also up there, got into the playoffs. Now, they won the North v South playoff, and then they won the North v Premier playoff. So Guilsfield have taken the place of Pontypridd United and move in to the top tier next year. So 2 more sides coming up from the north, and it looks to be the strongest of the 2 by far. Also a return to form for a lot of the bigger teams, although Aberystwyth and Airbus both struggled. They were in mid-table respectively. And then in the south, where the league seems to be a little bit weaker, we mentioned that Britain Ferry came up at a canter. Again, some of the big boys just behind them in Lanetli and Afan Lido. But Britain Ferry also got to the Welsh Cup final, having beaten us on penalties in the semis, and they look pretty good. So it'll be interesting to see what the relegation battle looks like next year. We did briefly mention them during the season, but the Welsh Cup was won by TNS, the Welsh League Cup was won by Bala Town on penalties, and I think it is important that other teams in the nation pick up some of the trophies too, particularly with TNS focusing on Europe. The League Cup is never going to be one they're winning. I've been a little bit disappointed by our performances. I would have liked to have competed for a League Cup or a Welsh Cup, but once we ended up in a title race, I had to sort of rest players for it. I was expecting to be floating around in a sort of comfortable third or fourth, and then we could have really thrown ourselves at a cup. But that's something, again, we can potentially look at in the future. Let's have a quick nose around England, Scotland and Europe before we finish, starting with the Premier League. Of course, because we're only in early May, the season is not finished yet, but there are some interesting things to note here. Liverpool top of the table and have virtually won the title, albeit they finished second to City last year, but they're definitely the top two here at the moment. At the bottom end of the table, we sort of saw a return to the norm, apart from the fact that Ipswich have stayed up comfortably. Look at the points totals for the sides in the bottom three. Two of the promoted clubs straight back down, and Wolves, after surviving the first season, have ended up faltering very quickly. And interesting that United have still been a mid-table club for both of the first two seasons. In the Championship, bit of an interesting one. Wrexham have finally made the playoffs. If we go and have a look at the league table overall, you can see that Bournemouth went straight back up with 100 points. Leeds went straight back up as well. And Burnley could complete the set in the playoffs depending on how they get on. My club, Luton Town, stayed up at the expense of Watford after their promotion. Lincoln went straight back down. And Bristol City got themselves into an interesting position down there as well. They're relegated back to the third tier. In League One, unfortunately, none of the sides came back automatically. Bolton and Huddersfield up in a much tighter division. Not a lot of goals being scored in that league, something we've often talked about for the leagues that you're not managing in. But there are a couple in the playoffs in Preston and Sheffield Wednesday. Let's move on to Scotland now, having covered the top few tiers, and we'll have a look at the SPL, where St Johnstone straight back down after promotion first season. At the top end, Celtic winning the title again. A bit different to our Bedford Town save, where Rangers won it first year by 20 points and have left Celtic with a mountain to climb. But here, Celtic have won it back-to-back and look very comfortable in doing so. Rangers and Hearts just behind them. And then let's look at the Champions League and Europa League to finish. We'll do the full sort of footballing world review 5 years in the future. But for now, I just wanted to give you an oversight of how the first couple of years looked and just see if there were any real standout stories at the top level. So again, we're not at the end of competition yet, but it is very much Spain versus England in the Champions League semi-finals. Real Madrid, Arsenal, Manchester City, Barcelona. Real Madrid won it in the first season, which I think they have in all of our saves, to be fair. But they look like they're playing really well. And look at that, highest average rating in the competition. Andrija Zivkovic, a San Marino Challenge legend for me in the mid-2000s. He is one of my favourite FM players of all time. Absolutely love him. Let's have a look at the Europa first season. Porto won that. Manchester United and Fiorentina look like they're going to be the finalists in a second season. Man United 12th in the Europa League, but seemingly doing pretty well. So I would assume that they must have won something in the first year, providing it's an FA Cup, I would imagine. That's the only way they would have got into the Europa League. Let's go and have a look at the Conference League, where Tottenham are losing 2-1 in a semi-final to Sevilla, and you've got Monaco, Werder Bremen in the other. Fiorentina won it in the first year, which I presume is why they're in the Europa League semi-final now. So some interesting stories, a lot of English involvement there, but will be intriguing to see if Welsh football can maybe contribute to that one in the future. TNS, certainly the only hope, having got to the last playoff round last year and got to the group stages in the first season. But if they do make it next year, I do worry for the league because the fixture schedule was brutal. If we go back and look at our season here, it was pretty normal in August, which again doesn't really make sense. But I guess again, that's partially due to the playoff rounds in Europe for those teams that were there. But if we have a look at September and October, we literally played every midweek. November, we played most of them. December, we played all but the first one. We played nearly every midweek for 3 or 4 months. If you throw in for TNS, say 6 European fixtures there as well, and the cut-off date is still mid-January, how on earth is that going to be managed? And how on earth are we going to do it in the future? It's an oversight in terms of that split date, which is so simple, but could be so costly for this save. I guess we'll find out the damage in future seasons. If you want to find out with me and you did enjoy this little end of season review, please do chuck a thumbs up on the video. I'll finish on the club site screen so you can see as much of the information as possible, including a few of our youth setup players who probably aren't going to be good enough. We'll be back tomorrow, of course, for the usual scheduled programming, a start to Season 3, which May not be a transfer special because it will be so early in July we're returning, but it will be a very special day because it will be our first European match with Rhyl 1879, a first round qualifier in Europa Conference League. What level of opposition are we going to be facing? And can we sneak through one round to get a little bit of money into the club? Be very interesting to see the answer to that. We'll keep an eye on Pennybont's progress as well and other signings across the division. There have been some fairly big names linked, but January was actually really quiet here as so many clubs were having board takeovers. Don't know whether that's a coincidence or not. We'll keep an eye on it this summer and reflect on it in the next episode. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of Season 3 as we head into it starting tomorrow, and please do subscribe and turn that notification bell on to make sure you don't miss a thing. As always, a massive thank you for your support with this series and the many guides we've produced for FM26 already. They're up in that playlist in the eye above. You can check out all of the ones you've missed so far. Follow us on Twitch for regular live streams too. We'll be turning our attention to Cricket 26 a bit later in the week, where there's a new manager career mode for us to get involved with. Maybe the start of the future, who knows? We all have a management game, don't we? I'll see you again tomorrow for the start of Season 3, our first European game, hopefully a couple of signings, and maybe some progression off the pitch too. I'll see you there to find out how we do.